Welcome back to another episode of Power of Kindness on TALRadio. I am your host, Allie, and today I'm joined by two inspiring individuals that I had the pleasure of e-meeting at last year's TAL World Kindness Day event. I am speaking to the Asavas. Raj and Anna are the founders of HungerMitao, a grassroots movement working to wipe out hunger in local communities. Raj and Anna, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so happy to be able to talk to you again.
Thank you, Ali. It's a pleasure to be back.
Yeah, good to be here and good to see you again, Ali.
Yeah, it's been a little bit since we last connected. Like I mentioned, we talked during the TAL World Kindness Day event on November 13th of last year. We did a wonderful panel discussion with the kids from the Farm Link Project. And yes, of course, we'll make sure to share the link with that panel discussion on our social media accounts for all of our listeners. But for those who didn't have the chance to hear that conversation, could you give some background on HungerMitao and what it is you guys are doing?
Great. First of all, Ali, thank you very much for this opportunity. For the benefit of your listeners, HungerMitao, let me just kind of explain the term HungerMitao. Hunger is, of course, an American word. Mitao is an Indian word. Mitao means wipe out. So HungerMitao means wipe out hunger. So what exactly is HungerMitao? Let me start by sharing what it is not. It is not a separate 501c3 organization. It is a purely cost-focused, volunteer-driven movement. And we are laser-sharp focused on fighting hunger right here in the United States. About 6 years ago, Anna and I were shocked to learn about the hunger issue in America. When we learned that 50 million people across America do not know where their next meal is coming from. And when we found out that 1 million people right where we live in North Texas, and I'm talking about a county which is one of the richest county in the country. 1 in 4 school-going children doesn't know where the next meal is coming from. When Anna and I learned about that, we said, well, we just have to do something about it. So the initial reaction typically is, okay, let's go start feeding the hungry. Let's make sandwiches. Let's, give cooked meal. We said we both have a very good, solid corporate background. So we did our due diligence to figure out, validate. First of all, is that hunger issue for real? And then secondly, what is the best way to address it? Anna, the Philanthropy Council?
So we had by then learned about the food bank, and I joined their Philanthropy Council. This is for our local food bank here in North Texas. And working with the food bank for almost a couple of years, we kept getting more and more information about the causes of hunger, the extent of hunger, and what the food bank does. We also started volunteering more and more at the food bank. So, getting deeper into the cause, our engagement increased. And we learned that there is indeed such a vast issue, and the response has to be as large. And the food bank, we discovered, they were able to stretch a single dollar to 3 meals. And 98% of every dollar...
94%.
94% of every dollar donated went to operational costs. Right. So it was such an efficient machine that we found. So that's when Raj and I decided, nothing doing. We just need to power the food banks.
Right. We wanted to throw our support behind the food bank. And we basically, at that time, once we were convinced about the hunger issue, and once we knew that the food bank is doing a great job working with the government, working with the industry, working with the people, addressing the hunger issue, we figured there's no sense in creating yet another duplicate structure. We said, let's throw our resources, our know-how, our talent behind that. So we wrote our check of $100,000 to food bank on August 15, 2017. But then Anna and I did not want to be one and done. So we said to the food bank CEO that how about we work with our community and raise the hunger issue awareness within that community and engage them with the food bank in the fight against hunger.
And in this context, when Raj says our community, we mean the Indian American community in North Texas.
Right.
Because as we got deeper and deeper volunteering with the food bank, we noticed the absence of very many people who looked like us. And that's when we discovered that just as we were unaware of hunger around us. Perhaps the Indian American community is also not as aware.
So we got to work. Once the CEO loved the idea, and we committed to 3 years of our lives to stand up this community-driven model. Right? We got to work. My background is strategy. Anna's background is process and systems. We basically put our strategy, processes, and systems together and then rolled it out to our community. And we basically wanted to make sure that once we raise awareness about the hunger issue, we got to have a model where everybody can find some way to connect in the fight against hunger. It doesn't have to be always through donation. It could be through volunteering. It could be through a can of food that is sitting in their pantry that they can donate and somebody needy can actually benefit. So we basically identified what we call our 4 impact pillars. Number 1, obviously, was awareness. We asked the community to be aware of the hunger issue. And secondly, help us spread the word so everybody is aware of the hunger issue. Secondly, once they are aware, they could be in different stages in their lives, right? They may not be in a stage in life where they can write a check or whatnot. So how about they can come out and volunteer, give a couple hours of their time on the weekend to volunteer at the food bank. Food bank depends on an army of volunteers to keep the cost down. As Anna mentioned, $1 provides 3 meals. That's because 40,000 volunteers just in North Texas, go through the food bank, right? Imagine paying just the minimum wages to those 40,000 volunteers. It'll be $3 to a meal. So volunteers are very important. Food drives are very important because a majority of the food that the food bank gets from government, from people, from stores like Kroger, Walmart, etc., is donated. So donation of food is very important to them. And then funds are very important because they have to distribute the food to every zip code in and around the 13 counties that they service. And here I'm talking about just the North Texas food bank.
So essentially, what HungerMitao is a volunteer-driven movement evangelizing the extent of hunger in America and evangelizing the work of the food banks. Our focus is on the Indian American community. We are basically connecting the Indian American community with their local food banks.
And we also believe that if it can work with one community, then we can easily replicate it to other communities. And the reason we use the Indian American community is because both Anna and I come from India. We have a lot of connections and influence in the Indian community. So we felt that for a quick start, let us work with a community that we know and see if this works. And Ali, I'm so happy to share with you this model that was launched on September 29, 2017, with an ambitious goal of raising 1 million meals back then, has already touched 40 million meals in 4 years.
Across the US.
Across the US. This model has been replicated from North Texas to Houston, to Tarrant area, to Atlanta, to New York City, to Seattle. And then we have other food banks like New Jersey Food Bank, the Michigan Gleaners Food Bank, Austin Food Bank, etc., that are in the pipeline to get HungerMitao launched over there.
The process that you have taken, I think that the philosophy of let's look at the systems that are in place. Let's look at what's working. Let's see how we can support what's working. Because at the end of the day, it's about fighting hunger. Everybody is working towards the same goal. There's not a competition. So I think you made a very important point that you did your due diligence. You're doing research. You are putting your skills and your resources towards a mission that is so worthy and inspiring, but just the process that you guys have gone through is something that always really hit me, and I think kind of sets you apart from other organizations. Because like you said, Anna, you're not an organization, you're a movement, which I think is so important.
Right. And Ali, it's like Anna says all the time, it's almost like our entire corporate career was in preparation to what we are doing today.
Yeah, this has been so gratifying, Ali. It really feels like we are now, it feels like a mission moment.
Yeah.
Right? This is what we were supposed to do. But to your point, in not building a parallel structure, empowering what was most successful in the field, hunger comes 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. Us making a sandwich and distributing it, it gives us a feel good for that time. But that person needs sustainable access to food. And the food banks are doing such an enormous job. So it just makes absolute sense to just power them with our resources.
I personally wish that everyone out there who has that spirit of giving back starts with that first step, which is before that urge of starting something new with your name on it or whatever. It could be ego driven. It could be just ignorance of not doing your research. Take time to see, is somebody else doing something good in that space? And if they are, what are they lacking? How can we help them? So that way we are doing less of reinventing the wheel, more of moving the wheel forward.
That is an excellent point. It's about empowering the systems that are already in place. It's about working towards a common goal, and that knowledge base and educating yourself is extremely important. And listeners have heard me talk to all kinds of people and organizations who have talked about, hey, first things first, awareness, do your research, find out what's going on, see what's happening in your community, see who you can support and how you can support. You gave a background on your organization, your process. Can you speak to some of the programs that you guys are running? I know that you recently had a national campaign for HungerMitao Month. How did that go? And what are some of the other things you have planned going forward?
Thank you for asking that question, because we are very proud of the HungerMitao Month. As HungerMitao, and we've already talked about the fact that it's a movement to help food banks in the US, strengthened with our resources. And we are focusing on the Indian American community to become aware of hunger and to support their food banks. So what we do is we do 2 large food drives in a given year. Our first one is in March, about March and April, and we call it the Spring Food Drive. And that's a culmination of a lot of spring festivals in India. So it seems an opportune time to do a food drive. Our second one is in August, and that's the one that we just completed. So in August, the food drive is called the HungerMitao Month. August is of special importance for people from India because it's also the month of India's independence. And we thought it would be great. Normally people don't even notice when the date comes and goes because we are so busy in our work. But we thought it would be great to commemorate this special event that's part of our history with an event here where we rise up to give during the month of August.
We actually call it Independence from Hunger Month. Just like India got its independence in August. So the month of August, we call it Independence from Hunger, and challenge the Indian American community across America to step up, to conduct food drives in their communities, right? And then help the food bank with food, etc. Of course, the pandemic has thrown a curveball our way. So we pivoted and we moved on last year to funds for food drive. Right. Then we saw donor exhaustion, and then we pivoted again, right, Anna?
Yes. Lots of pivots, just like everybody has had to do. Yeah. So actually this year, our strategy was to scale this movement.
Yep.
Because eventually we would love for this to become a national movement where everybody has their calendars marked and equates August with HungerMitao Month. So this year, what we did was, because we are having to pivot to an online model, we worked with Feeding America to set up the infrastructure for donations that people can make from across the country. We worked with several food banks, kind of hand-holding them into how they would launch this campaign within their food banks, how they would work with the Indian American community to kind of fund this initiative. And so we've had great progress with this. And more than the donations raised, this has been such an awareness generating movement for us. And obviously, organizations like yours, programs like yours help us bring our voice to a lot more people than we actually can. So thank you for helping us amplify our message.
Right. Now, as Anna said, this year, our focus was scale. Because while we were operational as HungerMitao at about 6 food banks, but Feeding America and other food banks were also interested in learning and joining in the HungerMitao Month. And so for this year's month of August, we spent a lot of time with these food banks. We work with food bank in New Jersey, food bank in Michigan, and we also work with organizations like AT&T, Tata Consulting Services, and we set up their links at the Feeding America level. And those links are so strategic that no matter who donates from where, right, based on their zip code where the donation came from, that money eventually flows to the food bank in that area. So that's how we work with the Feeding America organization to set it up. So it took a lot of our energy in putting the infrastructure that can handle the scale. And today we are very satisfied with about a dozen massive food drives that took place during the month of August. I'm happy to share with you. And by the way, we have not stopped it because August rolls right into September, which happens to be Hunger Action Month across the country from the food banks system point of view. So we said, let's continue on with this. So where we are today, drum roll, please. We are almost at $100,000 raised across the country. And based on Feeding America numbers, since this is a national movement, that is the right way to convert into number of meals. Feeding America can enable 10 meals to $1 at their level. So that means the Indian American community through HungerMitao in just the month of August have enabled almost 1 million meals.
Which was your initial goal 4 years ago.
Exactly.
And our initial goal wasn't to stop after 1 million.
Yeah.
But our goal has always been, let's count our milestones in increments of 1 million.
Yeah. In fact, Anna's vision is that once the community knows about the hunger issue and this model, HungerMitao model through which they can actually make an impact and measure the impact, we are capable. Our community is capable of enabling 1 million meals a month.
Wow.
Yeah, we'll get there.
And you and our listeners know that the need is there.
And this may be the right time for our listeners to also know our website so that they can basically go and learn more about the genesis of HungerMitao, our contact information, etc. And it is very simple. It is hungermitao.org.
Perfect. And we will make sure to link to that on our social media as well.
Thank you.
I mean, you guys set goals and then you exceed them dramatically. So you have had a lot of success and lots to be proud of. However, you also touched on the pivots that have had to be made. And we're seeing a lot. Everybody has had to pivot in various ways personally over the last almost 2 years now, fortunately. But we're also seeing, especially for nonprofits, philanthropy, charity organizations, there have been a lot of challenges recently because of COVID, but throughout history, we have seen how nonprofits, movements have had to adjust to the times and to the culture and as needs come up. And especially in terms of hunger in the United States, the need has just continued to rise. It's incredible how some of the numbers that are coming out of Feeding America. I mean, just from their website, they were saying that due to COVID alone, 43 million people face hunger in the United States, including 13 million children. When you see those numbers, what are some of your thoughts and how do you face some of these challenges?
It's challenging for sure. We tell our listeners, we do a radio show here locally, and we constantly remind them that the hunger issue that was elevated because of COVID is not going to go away as soon as we feel like the economy has reopened. History shows us that it takes 3 to 4 years for general population to kind of come out of the impacts of that, whether it's the depression, whether it's this pandemic. So just because we hear things on Wall Street that, unemployment is low, or USDA comes out with a paper that talks about, hunger numbers, I feel like a national disaster of hunger was near averted because of the measures that the government took, because of the charitable food that was made available to people through Feeding America, through the food banks, through other parallel organizations. We actually have been able to navigate through this without reaching the projected numbers.
While we possibly averted major disaster, but the ironic thing is that the numbers have gone up dramatically. Just here in North Texas, they had projected before pandemic to be able to build a capacity to serve about 92 million meals a year. And that was by 2025. And that is what they were working towards. And pandemic hit in 2020, 5 years earlier. And in the pandemic year, last year, they actually delivered 125 million meals. That was like, they were looking at 5 years down the road to get to 92. They had to serve 125 million meals. Now, as Anna said, this is something that some people may not catch on to. The fact that the food bank did such a fantastic job that as retail industry shut down, as people were laid off, as people were homebound, right? The food bank jumped into high gear to make sure that at least they won't go hungry.
Yeah. And as retail donations stopped because people were buying up everything, stores had nothing to donate. Mm-hmm. I mean, talk about pivoting.
Yeah. So we actually, every day, Anna and I, we keep reminding and thanking each other that we are glad that we learned about the food bank and did not have the urge to start something new in this space, because they are a very well-run organization, disciplines in place. Feeding America is a very wonderful umbrella organization looking over all the 200 food banks to make sure that they operate by established standards and processes and procedures. So we are very impressed with that. So going back to your question about pivoting, we pivoted, the food bank pivoted, frankly speaking, the world pivoted, right? And if somebody who stood still, they probably got run over. If somebody who stood still, they probably ran into more challenges. I mean, this was the time not to sit there, feel sorry for ourselves, not to figure out what's happening, but to figure out what can I do? How can I help? I'll share with you one thing that during last year, the number of people, because fortunately we started this movement almost 4 years ago. So last year, most of the people here in North Texas are well aware of HungerMitao. So last year, the number of people who called us because their family rooms, their living rooms were invaded by scenes of long lines on the television, right? People waiting to get a box of food, etc. So they said, hey, this is not right. What can I do to help? And they remembered the HungerMitao radio show they heard. They remembered the time when Anna and I went and talked at their community gatherings. They remembered at the time that, we had Starbucks meeting with few individuals, and they reached out to us, say, hey, I see these long lines. What can I do? And we said, well, help the food bank. And we raised some really record amount of food and funds for the food bank last year.
So definitely we can speak to the success we saw here and with the food banks that we work with. But from a food bank perspective, I believe every single food bank will attest to the generosity of the community that kept it afloat during such a hard time. But again, Ali, to all your listeners, I would say the need has not gone away. So please stay engaged. Volunteer at the food banks, donate money to your local food bank. Come join us at www.hungermitao.org. Connect with us. We would love to work with every single person that's listening today.